At my husband's company gala, the guard glanced at me and said, "Sorry, guests wait outside." Inside, my husband smirked, whispering, "You wouldn't fit in here anyway." Every other spouse sat proudly beside their partner. I watched him laugh with his assistant, then quietly opened my phone, sent one message to the board, and walked out as everything began to unravel. "Hello everyone. Go ahead and get comfortable, maybe pour yourself a cup of coffee or tea. I need to tell you what happened to me. It's a story I've kept locked away for a little while now, but I think it's time to let it out. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. It all came to a head on a crisp evening in October, the kind of night where the air is so clear you feel like you can see forever. I was standing in front of the Meridian Grand Hotel. You know the one, all gold trim and marble pillars, the kind of place that smells like old money and new secrets. I was wearing an emerald green dress. It was my mother's, a beautiful silk gown she'd worn to her own company celebrations decades ago. She was a software engineer, too, back when women in tech were, well, even rarer than they are now. The dress still fit perfectly, and I remember thinking how the deep green shimmered under the city lights, like liquid jade. It made me feel substantial. For a little while, anyway. Tonight was the annual Vertex Industries Excellence Gala. My husband Walter's big night. For 7 years, my entire life had been orchestrated around his career, his needs, his next big step. And tonight was supposed to be the culmination of all of it. I walked through the main entrance, the sound of my heels clicking a steady, confident rhythm against the polished marble floors. I followed the elegant signs pointing toward the ballroom, my heart a nervous little bird in my chest. At the entrance, a security guard stood with an iPad, his expression professionally blank. He was big, broad-shouldered, the kind of guy who could make a brick wall feel insecure. "Name?" he asked, not looking up. "Eleanor Mercer," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm Walter Mercer's wife." He scrolled through the list on his iPad. Frowned. Scrolled again. His brow furrowed. "I'm not seeing you on the list, ma'am." "Oh, there must be a mistake," I said, a nervous laugh escaping my lips. "I'm his spouse. He should be inside already." "I'm sorry," he said, and this time he did look at me, but his eyes were flat, dismissive. "But if you're not on the list, you'll need to wait outside." These are the instructions I was given. Before I could process what he was saying, his hand moved to my shoulder. It wasn't rough, not exactly, but it was firm, impossibly strong, physically guiding me back, away from the entrance. Away from the light and the music and the life I had helped build. I was being removed. Through the grand glass doors, I could see everything with a horrifying clarity. Round tables draped in pristine white linen, glittering with crystal and silver. Executives laughing, their spouses seated proudly beside them. I saw the mayor's wife at the head table, looking radiant. I saw the CFO's husband raising a glass for a toast. And there, at a prominent table near the stage, sat Walter. He was in his custom-tailored tuxedo, the one that cost more than Hazel's entire year of after-school programs. And sitting beside him, in a silver gown that caught the light like armor, was Sylvia, his assistant. Our eyes met through the glass. For a split second, I saw a flash of panic in his face, maybe even shame. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by something cold, something hard. He leaned towards Sylvia and whispered something in her ear. She turned, her perfectly made-up face twisting into a smirk as she looked directly at me. I couldn't hear the words, of course, but through the glass, in that terrible, bright room, I could read Walter's lips as clearly as if he'd shouted them across the corridor. "You wouldn't fit in here anyway." And just like that, 7 years of my life came into focus. 7 years of waking before dawn to fix his mistakes. Of sacrificing my own brilliant career so he could build his. Of being his ghostwriter, his programmer, his unpaid, invisible partner. As Sylvia placed a proprietary hand on his arm and they both turned away, laughing, dismissing me as easily as the security guard had, I understood the truth. I wasn't his partner. I was a tool. And tools, when they are no longer needed, are simply put away. The walk away from those glass doors was the longest of my life. My heels, which had felt so confident just minutes before, now seemed to echo my humiliation through the empty marble corridor. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The image of Walter and Sylvia laughing, framed by the golden light of the ballroom, was already burned into my mind. Outside, the cold night air was a shock, a slap in the face that brought tears to my eyes. I pulled my wrap tighter around my shoulders, my mother's emerald dress feeling like a costume for a role I had failed to play. I stood on the curb, watching couples in their evening wear step out of gleaming black cars, their laughter echoing in the night. They were all heading into the world I'd just been ejected from. My phone felt heavy and cold in my hand as I pulled up the Uber app. It was all so surreal. A few minutes ago, I was Mrs. Walter Mercer, on my way to celebrate my husband's success. Now, I was just a woman in a fancy dress, stranded on a sidewalk, trying not to fall apart. The car that arrived was a simple sedan, a stark contrast to the limousines and town cars lining the hotel's entrance. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror as I slid into the back seat. "Special occasion?" he asked kindly. I just nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "You could say that," I finally managed to whisper. The drive home was a blur of city lights streaking past the window. The world outside was moving, living, breathing, but inside that car, time stood still. My mind, however, was racing, replaying not just the horror of the last hour, but the thousands of moments that had led to it. It was like a dam had broken, and years of suppressed memories came flooding back. I remembered just that morning. I'd woken up at 4:30 a.m., the sky still a deep, starless black outside our Boston apartment. Our daughter, Hazel, was still asleep, her little chest rising and falling rhythmically from her room down the hall. I'd crept into the small corner of our living room that Walter called his home office and opened his laptop. He had a huge quarterly presentation for the board of Vertex Industries on Monday, and he'd asked me to just give it a final look. A final look. That was Walter's code for "please fix this for me." And like always, I did. The budget projections were a mess. He'd made a formula error, a simple but catastrophic one, that threw the numbers off by a full $3 million. It was the kind of mistake that would have made him look not just incompetent, but like a fool. My fingers flew across the keyboard, the familiar logic of the spreadsheets a strange comfort in the pre-dawn quiet. I rebuilt the formulas, corrected the graphs, and updated the data visualizations with the clean, elegant designs I'd created for him years ago. I did what I always did. I made him shine, while I remained in the shadows. The car hit a pothole, jolting me back to the present. I looked at my reflection in the dark window, a woman with tired eyes, wearing a beautiful dress that felt like a lie. For years, I had told myself this was a partnership. I believed him when he said my support was a temporary investment in our future. That once he made senior VP, I could finally restart my own career, maybe even launch the consulting firm I'd always dreamed of. What a fool I had been. Staring out at the darkened streets of the city we were supposed to conquer together, I realized I hadn't been investing in our future. I had been silently funding his, with my time, my talent, and my soul. And tonight, he had made it perfectly clear, the return on my investment was absolutely nothing. When the Uber finally pulled up to our cramped apartment building, the peeling paint on the corridor walls seemed to mock the silk of my dress. I paid the driver, walked up the 3 flights of stairs, and unlocked the door to the home that suddenly felt like a stage set for a life that wasn't mine. The apartment was quiet. The babysitter had put Hazel to bed hours ago. I walked through the living room, my eyes taking in the evidence of our life, or rather, the life I'd been propping up. The worn-out second-hand couch, Hazel's toys scattered on the rug, the stack of my advanced coding textbooks I was using as a makeshift monitor stand. It was all so real. And so far from the glittering ballroom at the Meridian Grand. That's when the anger, a cold and heavy thing, began to settle in my bones. It wasn't just about tonight. Tonight was just the final, brutal cut in a death by 1,000 little ones. My mind flashed to Hazel's 7th birthday last month. She had talked about this one specific robotics kit for months. She'd show me pictures from the catalog, her eyes shining as she explained how she would build a robot that could help Mommy with her coding. It was the only thing she asked for. I'd reminded Walter about it a dozen times. He arrived 2 hours late to her little party, holding a generic drugstore card and a wilting chocolate bar. I'll never forget the look on her face. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a quiet, heartbreaking crumble. Daddy forgot, she'd whispered to me later, and when I confronted Walter, he just shrugged. I'm sorry, Ellie. I've just been swamped with important work stuff. Important work stuff. I knew exactly what that work stuff was. It was the inventory management algorithm I developed to optimize Vertex's entire supply chain. It was the predictive modeling system I built that had saved the company millions. It was the automated reporting dashboard that Walter couldn't even explain without the notes I wrote for him. He was too busy taking credit for my work to remember his own daughter's birthday wish. And where was all the money from his brilliance going? He told me we couldn't afford Hazel's summer science camp. We have to be smart with our money right now, Ellie, he'd said, his voice full of false sincerity. We're investing in the future. That was the same week I found the receipt. It had fallen out of his gym bag while I was doing laundry. Cartier. $8,000. For a watch. The pieces started clicking into place, forming a mosaic of deceit I had been too trusting, or maybe too tired, to see. The Uber receipts I'd found on our joint account, always for 2 people, to fancy downtown restaurants he claimed were client meetings. And then there was the phone call from my mother a few weeks ago. She'd sounded so hesitant. Ellie, dear, she'd said, I saw Walter today in Cambridge. At that little French place you love. My heart had stopped. Walter was supposed to be in Chicago for a critical client meeting. He was with someone, my mother continued, her voice gentle. That pretty blonde from his office, the one from the Christmas party. Sylvia. I'd met her exactly once, at that company Christmas party. She had looked right through me like I was a piece of furniture while gushing to everyone about Walter's genius. Standing there in my silent living room, the emerald dress feeling heavy on my shoulders, it all became sickeningly clear. The watch. The dinners. The lies. He wasn't just stealing my work. He was using the success built on my back to fund a life with another woman. The humiliation from the gala wasn't a random mistake by a security guard. It was a calculated, deliberate message. I was being replaced. And my own work had paid for my replacement. The next morning arrived with a doorbell that sliced through the fragile quiet of the apartment. It was 7 a.m., way too early for visitors. I was in my old MIT sweatshirt, the one with a faint coffee stain on the sleeve that I never seemed to have time to wash. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the night on the couch, watching the sky slowly turn from black to gray, my mind a whirlwind of anger and grief. I opened the door, and there she was. Sylvia Frost. Standing in our hallway, looking completely out of place against the peeling paint. She was wearing a pristine, cream-colored designer suit that probably cost more than our monthly rent. She held a sleek leather folder, and on her wrist, catching the dim light of the hallway, was the Cartier watch. Her perfume, something expensive and French, filled our entryway, an invasive, cloying scent. I need Walter's signature on these quarterly reports, she said, her voice crisp and businesslike. She didn't wait for an invitation, just pushed past me into the living room as if she owned the place. Her eyes swept over our apartment with a barely concealed disdain. I saw her gaze linger on the second-hand couch, on Hazel's toys, on my stack of coding books. It was a look that judged and dismissed my entire life in a single glance. He forgot to sign them yesterday when we were reviewing the presentation, she added, tapping her long, manicured fingers on the folder. She moved through our small space with an unnerving confidence, her heels clicking sharply against our scratched hardwood floors. "Walter's in the shower," I said. I was proud of my voice. It was level, steady, betraying none of the volcanic rage building in my chest. She turned to me then, really looked at me for the first time. A slow, condescending smile curved her lips. "You know," she said, gesturing vaguely at our apartment, "Walter deserves so much better than this." But her eyes stayed locked on mine when she said it. We both knew she wasn't talking about our living situation. "Better than what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Someone who understands his world," she said smoothly, setting the folder down on our coffee table, right on top of the algorithm sketches I'd been working on late last night for Walter's next project. His ambitions. Someone who can stand beside him at events. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Not wait in parking lots. The jab was deliberate, a twist of the knife from the night before. She knew. Of course, she knew. She'd probably helped plan the whole thing. Just then, Walter came out of the bedroom, a towel around his waist. His face lit up when he saw her. "Sylvia! What are you doing here?" "Just getting those signatures you forgot, boss," she said, her voice suddenly playful and sweet. I stood in the kitchen, pretending to make coffee, pretending not to see the way his hand lingered on hers for just a second too long as he took the pen. I watched them, these two architects of my humiliation, standing in the middle of my home, finalizing the paperwork for the life they were building on the ashes of mine. After she left, the scent of her perfume hanging in the air like a taunt, I felt a shift inside me. The grief was burning away, leaving something harder, colder, and much, much more dangerous in its place. The lioness in my own den had been poked one too many times. After Sylvia left, her triumphant clicks echoing down the hallway, a small voice piped up from the doorway. "Mommy?" Hazel stood there, already dressed for school in her little overalls, her backpack dragging behind her. "Who was that lady?" "Just someone from Daddy's work, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile that felt brittle. Over breakfast, she pushed her cereal around the bowl, her little face serious. "Mommy, why doesn't Daddy come to my school stuff anymore?" she asked quietly. "Lily's dad came to the science fair yesterday. And Marcus's dad helps with reading time." My heart broke into a million tiny pieces. I didn't have an answer that wouldn't shatter her world. Walter had missed her last 3 school events, including the parent-teacher conference where her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had specifically requested both of us attend to discuss Hazel's advanced placement in mathematics. "Daddy's just very busy with work, honey," I managed, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. But the real blow, the one that knocked the wind out of me completely, came later that morning. When I dropped Hazel off at school, Mrs. Patterson pulled me aside, her expression concerned. "Mrs. Mercer," she began, her voice low. "I just needed to update our emergency contact information with you. Your husband called yesterday." "He did?" I asked, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. "Yes," she continued, looking down at a form on her clipboard. "He said that if we can't reach you in an emergency, we should call a Miss Sylvia Frost. He said she's his executive assistant and could handle any emergencies." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I had to grip the edge of her desk to steady myself. "He did, what?" "He also mentioned she might be picking Hazel up occasionally," Mrs. Patterson said, now looking at me with worried eyes. "I just wanted to verify with you first, of course." It seemed a little unusual. I felt sick. Physically sick. Sylvia Frost. The woman who had stood in my living room just hours ago, telling me I wasn't enough. The woman who was sleeping with my husband. Was now on my daughter's emergency contact list. The sheer, calculated audacity of it was staggering. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This was a hostile takeover of my life. They weren't just pushing me out of Walter's world, they were trying to erase me from my own daughters. That evening, I did something I had never done before. While Walter showered after another late meeting, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I knew his passcode. It was Hazel's birthday. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. I picked it up, my hand trembling. What I found destroyed any last, lingering shred of hope I might have had for my marriage. Text after text between him and Sylvia. Not just flirtatious messages, but plans. Cold, hard plans for a future that didn't include me. "Can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore," Sylvia had written just that afternoon. Walter's reply, sent while he was supposedly in a meeting, "Soon. After the promotion goes through. I just have to handle the situation with Ellie first." The situation. That's what I was now. Not a wife, not a partner, not the mother of his child. I was a situation to be handled. A problem to be solved. That was the moment. That was the absolute, final second that the heartbroken wife died and the woman who would burn his world to the ground was born. He wanted to handle the situation? Fine. I would give him a situation he would never, ever forget. That night, after Walter fell asleep, snoring softly beside me as if he didn't have a care in the world, I slipped out of bed. The woman who went into our small home office was not the same one who had been numbly going through the motions for years. This woman had a purpose. A cold, clear, and methodical purpose. My first move was to contact my old friend from law school, Josephine. Josie was one of the sharpest family law attorneys in Boston. I sent her a simple text, "Josie, I need to talk. It's about Walter. Can you meet me tomorrow?" Discreetly. Her reply came almost instantly. "Coffee shop on Beacon Street. 10 a.m. I'll clear my schedule." The next day, sitting across from Josie in a quiet corner of the coffee shop, I laid out everything. The Gala, Sylvia, the emergency contact form, the text messages. I expected her to be shocked, to offer sympathy. And she did, but there was something else in her eyes, too, a steely resolve. "Okay, Ellie," she said, her voice low and firm. "Grieving time is over. Now, we build a case. We need evidence. Undeniable, ironclad proof of everything." She mentioned words I hadn't let myself think about yet: divorce, custody, assets. "He's been hiding his financial life from you, which means we need to uncover it. But more than that, you said he's been taking credit for your work?" "For 7 years," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Then we prove it," Josie said, her eyes glinting. "We don't just win a divorce, Ellie. We take back your entire life. Professionally and personally." That conversation lit a fire under me. For the next 3 months, I became two people. By day, I was the perfect, supportive wife Walter expected me to be. I made his coffee just the way he liked it. I cooked his favorite meals, the rosemary chicken on Mondays, the pasta arrabbiata on Wednesdays. I even made the steak with béarnaise sauce on Friday nights, when he'd come home late, smelling faintly of Sylvia's expensive perfume. I'd just smile, kiss his cheek, and pretend not to notice the way he guarded his phone like it contained state secrets. It was the performance of a lifetime. But by night, after he was asleep, I was someone else entirely. I would slip into his home office, a tiny, silent ghost in my own home. Armed with my phone, I photographed every document he brought home. Contracts, presentations, financial reports, all of it built on the foundations of my algorithms, my code. I set up an encrypted cloud server, a digital fortress accessible only to me. I called it Project Liberation. Each file was time-stamped, cataloged, and cross-referenced with the original code I had written on my personal laptop years ago. Josie had told me that Massachusetts was a one-party consent state for recordings, which meant I could legally record any conversation I was a part of. So I bought a small, discreet digital recorder and often left it running on my desk during the day. 2 weeks in, I hit the jackpot. Walter took a call from Sylvia in his office, forgetting to close the door completely. His voice carried clearly through the cracked door. "Lucy's algorithm is what got me noticed in the first place," he said, laughing. That laugh, it was so casual, so dismissive. "She has no idea I've been putting my name on everything. She's too trusting. That's her problem. Brilliant mind, no business sense." I stood in the hallway, my hand pressed to my mouth to stifle any sound, my heart pounding a furious rhythm against my ribs as my phone's recording app captured every single word. It was a confession. A signed, sealed, and delivered confession. Project Liberation was no longer just a possibility. It was a certainty. The weeks of gathering evidence were grueling. Living a double life was exhausting. Some nights, sleep just wouldn't come. My mind would be racing, going over lines of code, legal strategies, and the crushing weight of Walter's betrayal. It was on one of those sleepless nights, around 3 a.m., that I found it. I was scrolling through some high-level coding forums, a habit from my past life that I'd never quite been able to shake. It was a way to keep my skills sharp, to feel connected to the work I truly loved. And then I saw a post, an anonymous challenge. The title was simple: "Solve this logistics optimization problem." Significant opportunity for the right mind. Most programmers would have scrolled right past it. The problem was a beast, a multi-variable supply chain issue with layers of complexity that would take days, maybe weeks, to untangle. But as I read it, my heart started to beat a little faster. I recognized the pattern. It was strikingly similar to a problem I had solved for Walter 2 years ago, a solution that had saved Vertex a fortune and earned him a massive bonus. This one, however, had additional layers, a more elegant and challenging design. I couldn't help myself. It was like a siren song for my starved brain. I pulled my laptop closer, the glow of the screen illuminating my face in the darkroom. For the next 2 hours, the world outside my small apartment disappeared. There was no Walter, no Sylvia, no heartbreak. There was only the code. My fingers flew across the keyboard, the familiar rush of untangling a complex problem flooding through me like a drug. It felt like coming home. At 5 a.m., just as the first hints of dawn were breaking, I submitted my solution under a pseudonym, L. Hawthorne. My maiden name. I didn't think anything of it. It was just an exercise, a way to prove to myself that I still had it. The next afternoon, my personal cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me swipe the screen. "Am I speaking with Miss Hawthorne?" a voice asked. It was a woman's voice, professional, confident, and clear. My heart stopped. "This is she," I said, trying to keep my own voice steady. "Miss Hawthorne, my name is Vivian Croft. I'm the CEO of Nexus Dynamics. We were the ones who posted that coding challenge last night." I sank onto the edge of our bed, the phone pressed tightly to my ear. How had she found me? "Your solution was extraordinary," she continued. "Frankly, it was the most elegant piece of coding I've seen in a decade. We've actually been watching your work for some time. The improvements you anonymously submitted to our public API about 6 months ago, we know that was you." I was speechless. That was just something I'd done for fun one afternoon, a little fix I'd noticed while browsing their systems. "We'd like to offer you a position at Nexus," Vivian said, her voice direct. "Chief Innovation Officer. Full recognition for all your work, a team of your own, and a starting salary of $450,000. I literally gasped. The figure was staggering. It was more than double what Walter was making, even with all the bonuses he'd gotten from my work. I don't know what to say," I stammered. "You know about my current situation?" "Miss Hawthorne," Vivian said, and I could almost hear her smile. "We know talent when we see it, regardless of whose name is on the paperwork. The offer stands. It's here for you whenever you're ready." After we hung up, I sat in the silence of my bedroom for a long time. For the first time in years, someone saw me. Not Walter Mercer's quiet, supportive wife. They saw Elle Hawthorne. A brilliant mind. And they believed that mind was worth something. It was more than a glimmer of hope. It was a lifeline. The job offer from Nexus Dynamics was a secret I kept close to my heart. It was my light at the end of the tunnel, the proof that a life beyond Walter existed, a life where my name meant something. It made the daily charade of my marriage almost bearable, knowing I had an escape route. A few weeks later, an email arrived that stopped me in my tracks. It was from the MIT Alumni Association. The subject line made my chest tighten, remembering Dr. Audrey Hayes. Dr. Hayes. She had been more than a professor to me. She had been my mentor, my champion. I was just a scared freshman from a small town, overwhelmed by the sheer brilliance of everyone around me at MIT. I was convinced I didn't belong. Dr. Hayes was the one who saw something in me. She took me under her wing, pushed me harder than anyone ever had, and relentlessly championed my work. Eleanor, she used to say, her eyes sharp and kind behind her glasses, hiding brilliance like yours isn't humility, it's a tragedy. Don't ever let anyone put your light under a bushel. I clicked open the email and read the obituary. It described her groundbreaking work in machine learning, her fierce dedication to supporting women in technology, her unwavering belief that talent deserved recognition. Every word was a reminder of the path I had abandoned, of the woman I was supposed to become. The tears came without warning. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the obituary glowing on my laptop screen, just sobbing. Not loud, just silent, racking sobs for the woman I had lost, and for the woman I had lost. Suddenly, I felt a small hand on my arm. "Mommy, why are you crying?" Hazel stood beside me, her big, serious brown eyes, my eyes, filled with concern. I pulled her into my lap, burying my face in her soft hair, breathing in the familiar, comforting scent of her shampoo. "Someone very important to me died, sweetheart," I whispered. "She was my teacher, and she believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Hazel wrapped her little arms around my neck. "I believe in you, Mommy," she said, her voice solemn and sure. "You're the smartest person I know." Her simple, unwavering faith was like a balm on my wounded soul. And in that moment, something inside me solidified. This fight wasn't just for me anymore. It wasn't just about revenge on Walter. It was about honoring the legacy of Dr. Hayes. It was about showing my daughter what it means to stand up for your own worth. That night, after Hazel was asleep, I went back to my laptop and opened the encrypted folder on my cloud server. I looked at the name I had given it, Project Liberation. It felt incomplete. This was about more than just freeing myself. It was about unleashing a truth that had been suppressed for too long. My fingers moved across the keyboard. I deleted the old name and typed in a new one, Project Audrey. This was for her. This was for every woman who had ever been told her work wasn't her own. This was for Hazel, so she would never, ever have to fight a battle like this. Dr. Hayes was right. Hiding brilliance was a tragedy. And I was done being a tragedy. 2 weeks after Margaret's visit, the invitation arrived. It came on a Thursday afternoon, a thick, cream-colored envelope sitting innocuously in our mailbox among the bills and junk mail. I knew what it was before I even opened it. The Vertex Industries logo was embossed in gleaming gold at the top. My hands were steady as I slid the card out. The text was engraved in an elegant, swirling script. "Mr. Walter Mercer is cordially invited to the annual Vertex Industries Excellence Gala." Just his name. Not Mr. and Mrs. Mercer. Not Walter Mercer and guest. Just him. I placed it on the kitchen counter where I knew he would see it, a silent testament to his betrayal. Then, I picked up the phone and dialed his office line. His secretary, June Miller, answered on the second ring. June was a sweet, older woman who had always been kind to me. Her usually cheerful voice became strained the moment she heard mine. "Hi, June. It's Eleanor Mercer, I said, keeping my tone light. I'm calling about the gala invitation. There seems to be a little mix-up. It only has Walter's name on it. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for so long I thought she might have hung up. Then, faintly, I heard a distinctive laugh in the background. Sylvia's laugh. It was followed by her muffled voice saying something about avoiding awkward situations. My blood ran cold. Mrs. Mercer, June finally said, her voice barely a whisper, thick with discomfort. I am so sorry. But Mr. Mercer specifically requested a solo invitation. I held the phone tighter. He did? Did he give a reason? He said. June hesitated. He said it would be better for networking. Networking, I repeated, the word flat and dead in my mouth. I'm really, really sorry, June whispered, and I could hear the genuine regret in her voice. I tried to suggest. It's not your fault, June, I said, cutting her off before she could apologize again. I hung up the phone, my hand resting on the receiver. So that was the official story. Networking. That evening, Walter came home, saw the invitation on the counter, and barely glanced at it before sliding it into his briefcase. Big night coming up, he said, not meeting my eyes as he loosened his tie. The board will all be there. Important for the promotion. I know, I said calmly, turning from the sink where I was washing vegetables. I'm planning to attend. His head snapped up. His eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed. Ellie, that's not a good idea. It's really more of a business thing. Every other spouse will be there, Walter. I checked with my friend B. Her husband Russell got a +1 invitation. Well, your situation is different, he said dismissively, already walking away, already ending the conversation in his mind. But it wasn't over in mine. Oh, it was far from over. That night, while he slept, I went to my closet. Tucked away in the very back, in a garment bag I hadn't opened in years, was my mother's emerald dress. I pulled it out. The deep green silk felt cool and smooth beneath my fingers. I was going to his gala. He had drawn the battle lines, and I was about to show up to the fight. He thought my situation was different? He had no idea how different it was about to become. The night of the gala, Walter left at 6, kissing my cheek with an absent-minded peck. I need to get there early to prep, he'd said, the lie rolling off his tongue with practiced ease. Don't wait up. I won't, I promised. I waited until 7. My friend B arrived right on time, a bottle of Prosecco in one hand and a large makeup bag in the other. Her expression was one of fierce determination. Okay, she announced, marching into our small bathroom. Tonight, we make you unforgettable. B had been my rock through these last few months. I'd told her everything, and she'd listened without judgment, her anger on my behalf a comforting fire. She worked on me with the focus of an artist, transforming the tired, worn-out woman I saw in the mirror every day. She contoured my cheekbones, making them look sharp and defined. She used smoky eyeshadow to make my eyes look fierce, not weary. We're not going for pretty, Ellie, she'd said, her hands deftly styling my hair into an elegant twist that showed off my neck. We're going for power. When she was finished, she stood back. The dress, she commanded. I retrieved my mother's gown from its hiding place. As I slipped it on, the silk whispering against my skin, I mentioned, Walter always said this dress was too much. B snorted, zipping me up with a firm tug. Walter's an idiot. You look like what you are, a force to be reckoned with. I stared at my reflection. The woman looking back wasn't the invisible wife who'd spent 7 years fading into the background. She wasn't the heartbroken woman who'd been turned away at the door just a few weeks prior. This was someone else. Someone who belonged in boardrooms, on stages, at the head of tables. Someone who looked like she could burn down the world if she had to. My old MIT class ring, which I'd started wearing again, caught the light. It felt like a piece of my old self, the brilliant, ambitious girl I'd been, had finally come home. Bea drove us to the Meridian Grand in her sleek BMW, classical music playing softly through the speakers. "You know what you're doing?" she asked as we pulled into the valet area, her voice quiet but firm. I looked at the golden facade of the hotel, no longer a monument to my humiliation, but a battleground. "I'm taking back what's mine," I said. "Good," she squeezed my hand, her wedding ring pressing into my palm. "Russell's inside. He'll make sure people are watching when it happens." I got out of the car and walked into the hotel lobby. This time, there was no hesitation in my step. I walked past the formally dressed guests, a woman on a mission. At 8:30 p.m., I approached the ballroom entrance. The same security guard was there, iPad in hand. He recognized me instantly, a flicker of pity in his eyes. "Ma'am," he started, his voice apologetic. "I know," I said, giving him a small, calm smile. Guests wait outside. I positioned myself in the exact spot I had been forced to stand before, a place with a clear, unobstructed view through the glass doors. And I waited. The final act of my old life was about to begin. Inside the ballroom, the scene was just as I remembered, but this time, I saw it through different eyes. I wasn't an outsider looking in with hurt and confusion. I was a general surveying the battlefield before the first shot was fired. Walter stood at the microphone on the stage, basking in the spotlight. He looked confident, charming, every bit the successful executive. And beside him, glowing in a ridiculously expensive dress, was Sylvia. The perfect corporate power couple. What a lie. My eyes scanned the room and found my targets. Sterling Vance, the chairman of the board, sat at the head table, looking regal and commanding. Other board members were scattered throughout the room, their champagne glasses raised as Walter began what was clearly his promotion acceptance speech. And I believe that through the kind of innovative solutions that have always pushed Vertex forward. He was saying, his voice smooth and practiced. I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. In my drafts was the email I had spent weeks perfecting. The subject line was simple: the real architect of Vertex's success urgent. The email itself was brief, but the attachments were everything. 7 years of my work, organized chronologically. Every algorithm, every cost-saving projection, every breakthrough solution. And embedded deep within the code of each one, like a digital fingerprint, was my cryptographic signature. The final attachment was a simple spreadsheet, a timeline that showed every one of Walter's promotions and bonuses, perfectly correlated with the date I had delivered a major project to him. The evidence was overwhelming. It was undeniable. The email was scheduled to send at 8:47 p.m., right in the middle of his speech. But watching him up there, so smug, so completely unaware of the reckoning that was coming, I couldn't wait. It was 8:46. My fingers moved. I composed a new, very short email directly to Sterling Vance. The subject, right now. The body, Mr. Vance. Check your email. The one about Walter Mercer. I hit send. And then I did the same for the other 4 board members whose emails I had found. I watched through the glass. Sterling Vance's phone, sitting face down on the table beside his plate, buzzed. He frowned, annoyed at the interruption. He picked it up. I saw his eyes scan the screen. His expression shifted from mild annoyance to confusion, then to pure, undiluted shock. His eyes widened. He sat up straighter, tapping his screen to open the first attachment. The CFO sitting beside him noticed his reaction and leaned over. Sterling Vance showed him the phone. Within seconds, both of their phones were out. A quiet, frantic energy began to ripple through the head table. One phone lighting up, then another, then another. Walter was mid-sentence, saying something about a future of unparalleled growth, when Sterling Vance stood up. Abruptly. The scraping of his chair was the only sound in the suddenly silent room. The entire ballroom went quiet. Everyone turned to look at him. Walter faltered, his confident smile dissolving into confusion. "Mr. Mercer," Sterling Vance's voice was like ice. It carried through the entire room, and I could hear it clearly even through the glass. "We need to have a discussion. Now." The dominoes were falling. It was beautiful. Daniel, B.A.'s husband, chose that exact moment to stand up from his table in the accounting section. "Is it true?" he asked loudly, his voice ringing with feigned surprise. "Is it true that Walter Mercer has been taking credit for his wife's work for years?" The ballroom erupted. If you're still listening, could you do me a huge favor and like this video, and just comment the number 1 down below? It lets me know you're here with me on this journey. Your support truly means the world to me and keeps me going. Just type the number 1, and let's get back to what happened next. The room exploded into a cacophony of whispers and gasps. I saw people pointing, pulling out their own phones. Someone near the front shouted, "The algorithms have digital signatures embedded in them." Another voice from across the room cried out, "My God, this goes back 7 years." Through it all, I stood in the corridor, a still point in the turning world, visible to everyone, wearing my mother's emerald dress that Walter had said was too much. His gaze finally swept the room and landed on me. And in that moment, he knew. He knew it was all over. His house of cards wasn't just falling. It was being deliberately, meticulously, and gloriously demolished. The ballroom doors burst open and Walter stumbled out into the corridor, his polished composure completely shattered. His bow tie was crooked, his face was a blotchy, furious red. I watched as the champagne flute he was holding slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor in a spray of crystal and foam. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. "Eleanor, what did you do?" His voice cracked, high and desperate. Nothing like the confident executive who had stood on that stage just moments ago. His eyes darted from my face to my emerald dress and back again, as if he were truly seeing me for the first time in years. "I did what you never thought I would do, Walter," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I stopped being invisible." I held up my phone, showing him the sent email. Every line of code has my digital signature. Every algorithm traces back to my laptop. 7 years of theft, all documented. This is corporate sabotage," he sputtered, grasping for legal terms he didn't understand. "I'll sue you." You'll sue me for what? Telling the truth?" I gave a small, humorless smile. "Even your MIT thesis presentation, that was my work from grad school, just reformatted. I have the original files, Walter. With the original time stamps." His mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. Just then, Sterling Vance emerged from the ballroom, his silver hair slightly disheveled. His expression was a fascinating mixture of fury and something that looked almost like respect. He walked directly to me, ignoring Walter completely as if he were a piece of furniture. "Miss Hawthorne," he said, using my maiden name deliberately. The sound of it felt like a reclamation. "That consulting work 3 years ago, the portfolio optimization for my personal investments. That was you." It wasn't a question. I simply nodded. Every line of it. He turned to Walter, his voice dropping to a dangerously low temperature. "You told me you'd been working on it solo for months." "Mr. Vance, I can explain." Walter began, his voice pleading. "Save it for the lawyers," Sterling cut him off. He turned back to me. "Miss Hawthorne, Vertex Industries owes you a substantial debt." But before he could continue, new voices filled the corridor, sharp and authoritative. 3 people in dark suits were walking briskly toward us, their faces grim. The lead agent flashed a badge. FBI. My heart leaped into my throat. This was a part of the plan Josie had put in motion, but seeing it happen was another thing entirely. "Sylvia Frost," the lead agent called out. Sylvia, who had been trying to blend into the crowd of stunned guests, froze. Her silver dress suddenly looked like cheap tinfoil. "Yes," she squeaked. "We need to speak with you regarding embezzlement charges at Vertex Industries. And at 2 of your previous employers. This is insane." "I haven't done anything," she shrieked, her composed facade cracking completely. But the agents were already reading her rights. From the ballroom, June Miller, Walter's secretary, hurried over with a laptop, showing the agents something on the screen. I caught a glimpse, bank records, showing illegal transfers Walter had authorized into accounts in Sylvia's name. The same ones I had documented for my lawyer. My evidence had not only freed me, it had freed June from the fear that had kept her silent. As they led a screaming Sylvia away, she pointed a trembling, manicured finger at Walter. "He said it was legal. He said it was consulting fees. This is his fault." Walter's face went from red to ghost white. "She's lying. I don't know what she's talking about." I lifted my phone one last time and played the recording. Walter's own voice filled the corridor, crisp and clear. "The transfers to Natalie need to stay hidden. Route them through the consulting budget. She knows how to handle it." The final nail in his coffin. Sterling Vance's expression darkened even further. "Mr. Mercer," he said, his voice a low growl. "Follow me. The board will meet immediately." They disappeared into a private conference room off the main corridor, but not before Sterling Vance turned back to me. "Miss Hawthorne, would you be willing to join us? We need to understand the full scope of the innovations you created." I followed them into a cavernous, wood-paneled room where the entire board had assembled, their faces a mixture of shock and grim curiosity. For the next 3 hours, they went through everything. My email, with all its attachments, was projected onto a massive screen at the end of the long table. They pulled up algorithm after algorithm, and I watched with a detached sense of vindication as my digital signatures glowed in the lines of code like neon signs. They brought in their head of IT, a man I'd never met, who confirmed that the embedded timestamps proved, beyond any doubt, that every single file had been created on my personal laptop, often years before they were ever implemented at Vertex. "This logistics optimization alone," the CFO said, looking at me with something approaching awe, "this has saved us an estimated $12 million over the last 5 years. You wrote this?" "In my kitchen," I confirmed, my voice even. While my husband slept. Walter sat at the far end of the table, shrinking smaller and smaller with each revelation. When they played the recording of him admitting to stealing my work, he didn't even try to defend himself anymore. He just stared at the polished surface of the table, a broken man. Finally, Sterling Vance cleared his throat. The room fell silent. "Mr. Mercer," he said, the formal title dripping with contempt. "Your employment with Vertex Industries is terminated, effective immediately. You will forfeit all bonuses, stock options, and any potential severance. Furthermore, we will be pursuing legal action to recover the funds you illegally transferred to Ms. Frost." "You can't do this," Walter whispered, his voice hoarse. "I have a family. I have a daughter." Sterling's reply was cold enough to freeze fire. "You should have thought of that before you decided to steal from your family, Mr. Mercer." Then, they turned to me. They talked about compensation, about making things right. They offered me retroactive pay for 7 years of unacknowledged work, a salary commensurate with the value I had created. The number they quoted made my breath catch. It was more money than I could have imagined, more than Walter had earned in his entire career at Vertex. "That's a very generous offer," I said, my voice calm as I stood up. "But I'll need to have my lawyer, Josephine, review everything before I can accept." A keyword, lawyer, dropped so naturally into the conversation. It felt good. "Of course," Sterling said, also standing and extending his hand. "Miss Hawthorne, I deeply regret that we failed to see what was happening. We were blind. If you ever reconsider joining Vertex, the door will always be open." I shook his hand, my grip firm. I won't, I said simply. But thank you for finally seeing the truth. As I left the conference room, my head held high, Owen tried to grab my arm. Ellie, please, he begged, his eyes red-rimmed. Think about Hazel. Think about her custody. I pulled my arm away from his touch, the contact feeling vile. I am thinking about Hazel, I said, my voice low and fierce. I'm thinking about showing her that no one has the right to steal your work, your credit, or your dignity. Not even her father. The word custody had been his last weapon, and I had just disarmed it. I walked out of that hotel, leaving the wreckage of Walter's life behind me, the emerald dress swishing with every victorious step. The Monday morning after the gala felt like the first day of the rest of my life. The story had exploded across the financial media over the weekend. Bloomberg ran a segment titled "The Invisible Wife Who Exposed Corporate Theft." CNN Money was calling it the algorithm affair. My phone buzzed constantly with interview requests, but I declined them all with a simple, prepared statement: my work will speak for itself. I dressed carefully that morning, not in a gown, but in a sharp, navy blue suit that fit perfectly. I wore my mother's pearl earrings, the ones she'd worn on her own first day at IBM 40 years ago. As I was getting ready, Hazel came and stood in my bedroom doorway, her eyes bright. You look like a boss, Mommy, she said. I am a boss, sweetheart, I replied, and for the first time, I truly believed it. The Nexus Dynamics building was all glass and steel, a modern architectural marvel that screamed innovation and transparency, everything Vertex was not. Vivian Croft met me in the lobby herself, her handshake firm and warm. Eleanor, she said with a genuine smile. We are so thrilled you're here. Your team is waiting for you. She led me to a large conference room. When she opened the door, 20 developers, men and women of all ages, rose to their feet and began to applaud. Not polite, corporate claps. This was genuine, enthusiastic applause. The sound washed over me like warm rain after a 7-year drought. I was so overwhelmed I could barely speak. A young woman named Priya, the lead developer, stepped forward. Ms. Hawthorne, she said, her eyes shining with excitement. We've all studied your algorithms. The supply chain optimization, the predictive modeling, it's brilliant. We've been waiting for you. Waiting for me? I repeated, my voice catching slightly. Vivian showed us some of your anonymous work months ago when she was trying to figure out who you were, Priya grinned. We've been hoping you'd choose us ever since. Nobody else thinks like you do. Your code, it's like poetry that actually works. An older developer named James added, I've been in this field for 30 years, and your elegant solutions to complex problems are textbook material. And I mean that literally. I heard MIT wants to use your algorithms as part of their coursework. Standing there, surrounded by people who saw my work, who knew my name, who celebrated my contributions, I finally understood what real recognition felt like. It wasn't stolen or borrowed or hidden behind someone else's name. It was earned, and acknowledged, and celebrated. Thank you, I managed, my eyes stinging with tears I refused to let fall. Should we get to work? Vivian smiled. Your office is ready when you are. Corner suite. Your name is already on the door. It was. Eleanor Hawthorne. Chief Innovation Officer. My name. My title. My future. 6 months can change everything. I stood backstage at the Boston Tech Innovation Summit, reviewing my presentation slides one last time. The algorithm I'd created, now properly credited to Lucy Hawthorne, had revolutionized logistics across 3 major industries. This time, my name was on every slide. The auditorium was packed with over 2,000 attendees. As I walked onto the stage, the warm lights on my face, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the massive hall. Good morning. I'm Eleanor Hawthorne, Chief Innovation Officer at Nexus Dynamics. And today, I want to talk about what happens when invisible work becomes visible. The presentation was a resounding success. During the Q&A, a young woman stood up. Ms. Hawthorne, your story has inspired so many of us. What advice would you give to women whose contributions are being overlooked? Document everything, I said without hesitation. Trust your worth. And never, ever let anyone tell you to wait outside a room you helped build. The applause was deafening. A year to the day after that fateful gala, an email arrived. The address was one I recognized, Walter's personal Gmail. The subject line read simply, "I'm sorry." I opened it out of a distant curiosity. He was working at his brother Forrest's Toyota dealership now, in the service department. He wrote about the life he had lost, the fool he had been. He said Natalie got 18 months in a minimum security prison. He said he got what he deserved, a life without me and Hazel. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He just wanted me to know that he finally understood. I read it twice, feeling nothing but a vague, detached pity. I clicked archive without responding. Some things deserve only silence. My office at Nexus is on the 42nd floor. It's a corner suite with walls of glass, offering a panoramic view of Boston. But it's the western view I treasure most. Every morning, with my first cup of coffee, I can see the Meridian Grand Hotel, 5 blocks away. The same building where I'd stood outside, barred from entry, my world crumbling. Sometimes I think about that woman in the emerald dress. She felt so alone, so erased. She had no idea she was actually standing at the beginning of everything. A knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. It was Priya. "Lucy, the Pentagon just approved our contract. They want to implement your algorithm across their entire supply chain. Set up the team meeting for this afternoon," I said, my mind already racing ahead. As she left, I turned back to the window. Next month, Nexus is holding our own gala. Right there, at the Meridian Grand. I insisted on one detail for the planning committee: every single employee can bring anyone they want. No lists. No guards. No one waits outside. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Hazel. "Mom, can we work on my new app idea tonight? It's about women in tech who changed the world." I smiled, typing back. "Of course. We'll start with Ada Lovelace and work our way forward." Her reply came instantly. "And we'll end with you." Followed by a heart emoji. I looked out at the city, at that grand hotel standing like a monument to a past I had conquered. The woman who was told to wait outside had become the one everyone was waiting to see. And this time, I held the guest list. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It's still hard to talk about sometimes, but sharing it helps. It really does. If any part of this resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible or unappreciated, I hope you know you're not alone. Please, if you feel comfortable, share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to hear more stories, please consider liking this video and subscribing. It means more than you know. Thank you for being here with me today.